Elara Vance was a quiet presence in the bustling corporate offices of Sterling. Innovations, a company known for its cutting-edge technology and demanding work environment, she was a junior data analyst, a role that allowed her to blend into the background. A position she preferred. Her desk was tucked away in a corner of the open plan office, a sanctuary where she could immerse herself in spreadsheets and algorithms. Undisturbed by the constant chatter and ambitious clamor that filled the air, Elara was not one for small talk or networking events. Her voice was soft, her gaze often directed downwards, and her contributions in meetings were rare, yet always insightful. When she did speak, she possessed an extraordinary capacity for observation, a silent superpower honed by years of preferring to listen and watch rather than participate. This keen eye for detail extended beyond data points. It encompassed the nuances of human behavior, the subtle shifts in atmosphere, the unspoken stories unfolding around her. She noticed everything, a trait often overlooked in a world that valued loud declarations and bold gestures. But it was this very quietness, this almost invisible quality, that would one day make all the difference. A difference that no one else could possibly imagine or foreceive. The man at the apex of Sterling innovations was Arthur Sterling, himself a titan of industry, a visionary leader whose name was synonymous with innovation and success. He was a charismatic figure, with a booming laugh and an unshakable presence, a man who commanded respect and admiration from everyone he encountered. Arthur was perpetually in motion, a whirlwind of meetings, presentations, and international calls. His energy seemed boundless, his focus unwavering. He was the kind of CEO who inspired loyalty and pushed his teams to achieve the impossible. Lately, however, Elara had begun to notice very subtle changes in Arthur, changes that seemed to escape the notice of his inner circle. His executive assistants, his senior vice presidents, even his closest confidants. It began with a barely perceptible tremor in his left hand, a tremor so slight it could easily be mistaken for a nervous habit or the residual effects of too much coffee. Then there was a faint slurring of his words during long speeches, a momentary hesitation, slight mispronunciation that would vanish as quickly as it appeared, attributed by others to fatigue or the sheer volume of his public speaking engagements. His usually impeccable suit seemed to hang a little looser on his frame, suggesting a gradual weight loss that went unremarked upon by his busy colleagues, who were perhaps too accustomed to his dynamic persona to notice such minor physical alterations. Elara saw these things not because she was looking for them, but because her quiet nature allowed her to simply observe without judgment or expectation. She was a silent witness to the unfolding narrative of Arthur Sterling, a narrative that was slowly but surely deviating from its usual powerful trajectory. The corporate world was a relentless machine, and in its ceaseless grind, subtle shifts often went unnoticed or were quickly dismissed. Everyone around Arthur Sterling was too busy, focused on their own tasks, their own ambitions, their own deadlines, to truly see him for more than the powerful figurehead he was. His executive assistant, a meticulous woman named Brenda, would occasionally frown at his slightly delayed responses, but would attribute it to his overwhelming schedule or perhaps a momentary lapse in concentration. His vice presidents would notice his increased reliance on notes during presentations, but would simply assume he was being more thorough, a sign of his dedication, not a symptom of anything concerning. His public relations team would smooth over any minor verbal stumbles during interviews, attributing them to the pressure of live television or the complexity of the topics at hand. No one connected the dots. No one paused long enough to consider that these isolated incidents might be part of a larger, more troubling pattern. They were all too close yet too far, too involved in the day-to-day operations to step back and gain perspective. They saw what they expected to see: a strong, healthy leader, not a man whose body was slowly betraying him. The culture of Sterling Innovations was one of relentless forward momentum, a place where weakness was rarely acknowledged and certainly never openly discussed. Arthur himself, a man who prided himself on his resilience, would brush off any personal discomfort with a dismissive wave of his hand or a self-deprecating joke. He was a busy man, a powerful man, a man who did not have time for minor ailments or fleeting fatigue. His schedule was packed, his responsibilities immense, and the idea of slowing down or admitting to any vulnerability was simply unthinkable to him. and to those who orbited his formidable presence. Elara, however, saw beyond the facade. She saw the man, not just the CEO, and a quiet alarm began to sound within her, a persistent whisper that grew louder with each passing day. Elara's quiet desk in the corner became her observation post, a vantage point from which she could witness the subtle unraveling of Arthur Sterling. Her work often involved reviewing video conferences and recordings of company-wide addresses, giving her an unparalleled opportunity to study his mannerisms over time. She noticed how the tremor in his left hand was becoming more pronounced, especially when he was tired or stressed. It was still faint but unmistakable to her discerning eye. The slight slurring of his words was no longer momentary, it was subtly creeping into more of his sentences, particularly towards the end of a long day. His usually sharp wit seemed dulled, his responses sometimes a beat to slow. His eyes occasionally held a distant, unfocused look that belied his usual laser-like attention. She also observed a new habit, a subtle shuffling of his feet. When he walked, a slight imbalance that he would quickly correct, but which she caught every time. He would lean against door frames a little longer than necessary, or grip the back of a chair for an extra second before moving on. These were not dramatic symptoms, nothing that would warrant immediate alarm to someone not actively looking for them. But to Elara, who processed information with a meticulousness that bordered on obsessive, these small deviations from his baseline were glaringly apparent. She saw the faint dark circles under his eyes that no amount of concealer could truly hide. The way his usually vibrant complexion had taken on a subtle grayish tint, the way he would sometimes forget a name or a detail, a minor lapse that he would quickly cover with a laugh and a deflection. Her quietness was her strength. It allowed her to absorb information without the filter of preconceived notions or the pressure to react immediately. She was a sponge, soaking up every minute detail, every imperceptible change, building a mental dossier of observations that painted a worrying picture, a picture that no one else seemed to be painting or even acknowledging. As the weeks turned into months, Elara's concern for Arthur Sterling deepened. The subtle symptoms she had initially noticed were slowly but steadily progressing, becoming slightly less subtle, though still largely ignored by everyone else. The tremor in his hand was now visible even when he was relaxed. His speech had a persistent slight thickness that made some of his words sound muffled, and his gait was noticeably less steady at times. He would occasionally stumble or sway slightly, a movement he would quickly disguise as reaching for something or adjusting his posture, but Elara saw it all, and her stomach would clench with a silent dread. She started spending her lunch breaks researching various neurological conditions and metabolic disorders, cross-referencing symptoms with her observations of Arthur. She was not a doctor, she was not even a medical student, but her analytical mind was driven by a powerful sense of unease. She felt a growing responsibility, a heavy weight on her shoulders. She knew that if she did not act, no one else would. The thought of approaching Arthur Sterling filled her with an overwhelming sense of trepidation. He was the CEO, a formidable figure, and she was just Elara Vance, the shy data analyst. What could she possibly say? How could she possibly convey the seriousness of her observations without sounding presumptuous or even delusional? Her heart would pound at the mere thought of it. Her palms would sweat. Her voice would catch in her throat, but the image of Arthur's increasingly unsteady frame, his slightly slurred words, and the growing fatigue in his eyes gnawed at her conscience. She could not simply stand by and watch. She had to do something, even if it meant stepping far outside her comfort zone. Even if it meant facing the terrifying prospect of confronting the most powerful man in the company and potentially making a fool of herself. The stakes were too high, his health was clearly deteriorating, and time was of the essence. The internal struggle was immense, a battle between her innate shyness and a burgeoning sense of moral imperative every morning. Elara would arrive at work with a knot in her stomach, wondering if today would be the day she finally spoke up. Every evening she would leave feeling a pang of guilt for her inaction. The symptoms were becoming more frequent, more pronounced, and the whispers among a few of the more observant employees were beginning to surface, though still dismissed as stress or overwork. One afternoon, during a rare moment of quiet in the office, Elara saw Arthur Sterling walk past her desk on his way to the executive washroom. He leaned heavily against the wall for a moment, his face pale, his eyes momentarily closed. The tremor in his hand was unmistakable now, a constant vibration that seemed to ripple through his entire arm. He looked utterly exhausted, a shadow of his former vibrant self. In that instant, all of Elara's fear and hesitation evaporated, replaced by a surge of desperate resolve. She could not wait any longer. She knew she had to act now, or she might never forgive herself. The image of him leaning against the wall, so vulnerable, so unlike his usual powerful demeanor, solidified her decision. Her heart was still pounding, but a new kind of courage had settled within her, a quiet determination that transcended her usual timidity. Took a deep breath, a shaky one, but a breath nonetheless, and stood up. Her legs felt wobbly, her hands clammy, but her gaze was fixed on the door to the executive washroom. She knew this was her moment, her only chance to make a difference, to perhaps save a life. She walked slowly, deliberately towards the washroom, her mind racing, but her resolve firm. She would not let her shyness win this battle. Not when someone's well-being was at stake. Elara waited outside the executive washroom, her heart hammering against her ribs like a drum solo. When Arthur Sterling emerged a few minutes later, he looked even more fatigued than before. His eyes widened slightly in surprise at seeing her standing there, a junior data analyst waiting for him. Elara felt her cheeks flush, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "Mr. Sterling," she began, her voice barely a whisper, but surprisingly steady. I have something important to tell you, Arthur." Sterling, a man accustomed to confident pitches and strategic proposals, raised an eyebrow. His expression, it's a mixture of curiosity and slight impatience. "Yes, Miss Vance," he said, his voice a little hoarse. "Is there a data issue?" Elara took another deep breath. "No, sir, it is not about data," she said, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. "It is about you. I have been observing some things, and I am very concerned about your health." Arthur Sterling's expression shifted from impatience to mild amusement, and then to a hint of annoyance. "My health," he chuckled. "I am perfectly fine, Miss Vance, just a bit tired, the usual demands of the job." Elara shook her head. "No, sir," she insisted, her voice now firm with conviction. "It is more than just tiredness. I have noticed a tremor in your hand, a slight slurring of your speech and your gait. It is not as steady as it used to be. These are not normal signs of fatigue." Arthur Sterling's amusement vanished, replaced by a look of stunned silence. He looked at his left hand, then back at Elara, his eyes narrowing slightly. No one had ever dared to speak to him like this, especially not a junior employee from a different department. He was clearly taken aback by her directness and the specificity of her observations. "I assure you, Miss Vance, there is nothing to worry about," he said, his tone dismissive, but with a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, perhaps a hint of unease. Elara knew she had one chance to make him listen. "Please, sir," she pleaded, her voice filled with genuine concern. "I have seen these changes over weeks and months. They are getting worse. I truly believe you need to see a doctor immediately. It could be something serious." Arthur Sterling stared at her for a long moment, his usual confidence wavering under the intensity of her sincere gaze. He saw not an insubordinate employee, but a young woman genuinely worried for his well-being. The conviction in her eyes was undeniable. He had dismissed his own symptoms for months, but hearing them articulated so clearly by an outsider, especially someone so quiet and unassuming, struck a chord. He let out a long sigh, a sound of resignation, mixed with a grudging acceptance. "Perhaps you were right, Miss Vance," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it before. "Perhaps I should." Elara felt a wave of relief wash over her, a relief so profound it almost brought tears to her eyes. She had done it. She had spoken up. She had broken through his defenses, true to his word. Arthur Sterling scheduled an immediate appointment with his personal physician. The doctor initially dismissed Elara's observations as overzealous amateur diagnosis, attributing Arthur's symptoms to stress and the demands of his high-pressure job. However, Elara's detailed and persistent description of the progression of symptoms, which Arthur reluctantly corroborated, prompted the doctor to order a comprehensive battery of tests. The initial tests came back inconclusive, but Elara's insistence, relayed through Arthur that the symptoms were progressive and specific, led to more specialized neurological scans, and blood work days turned into agonizing days. For Elara, as she waited for news, she kept a close eye on Arthur, still observing him from a distance, noting any changes. It was during this period that the doctor finally called Arthur with the results. The diagnosis was grim, a rare but aggressive form of a neurological disorder that, if left untreated, would have rapidly progressed to irreversible damage and eventually fatality. The doctor explained that the subtle nature of the early symptoms often led to misdiagnosis or late detection, making Elara's early observations incredibly crucial. The disease had been silently advancing for months, perhaps even a year before she noticed anything. The doctor emphasized that her detailed account of the symptom progression was instrumental in guiding the diagnostic process and ultimately leading to the correct and timely identification of the illness. Had it been detected even a few weeks later, the treatment options would have been far more limited and the prognosis significantly worse. Arthur Sterling was immediately put on a specialized treatment plan involving medication and intensive physical therapy. The early diagnosis meant that the treatment had a much higher chance of success, and the progression of the disease could be significantly slowed or even halted. Elara had not just noticed symptoms, she had provided the critical timeline, the missing pieces of the puzzle that allowed the medical professionals to understand the true nature of Arthur's deteriorating health. Her quiet observations had given him the gift of time, the gift of a fighting chance. The news of Arthur Sterling's diagnosis and the critical role Elara Vance played in saving his life rippled through Sterling Innovations and beyond. The initial shock was immense, followed by a wave of admiration and gratitude. Arthur Sterling himself underwent a profound transformation. The near-death experience and the realization that a quiet junior employee had seen what everyone else, including himself, had missed, humbled him deeply. He made a full recovery, though he continued with maintenance therapy and regular checkups. His booming laugh returned. His energy levels rebounded, and the tremor in his hand became a faint memory. He called Elara into his office a few weeks after his treatment began and personally thanked her, his voice thick with emotion. He told her that her courage and keen observation had saved his life a debt he could never repay. He offered her a promotion to a senior analyst position with a significant raise and a direct reporting line to him, a role that would leverage her exceptional analytical skills and attention to detail. Elara initially felt overwhelmed by the sudden spotlight, but she accepted the offer, recognizing the opportunity to make a greater impact within the company. Her quiet presence no longer went unnoticed. She became a respected figure, a testament to the power of observation and the quiet strength of empathy. The company culture shifted subtly to there was a newfound appreciation for listening, for paying attention to the details that often slipped through the cracks. Arthur Sterling often spoke about Elara's actions in company-wide addresses, emphasizing the importance of looking out for one another, of valuing every voice, no matter how soft the incident. Served as a powerful reminder that true leadership was not just about grand visions and bold decisions, but also about the quiet moments of connection and the courage to speak up when it mattered most. Elara Vance, the shy data analyst, had not sought recognition or reward, but in her quiet determination, she'd achieved something truly extraordinary. She'd not only saved the life of her CEO, but had also transformed the very fabric of Sterling Innovations, proving that sometimes the most profound impact comes from the most unexpected places. A quiet girl with an extraordinary eye for the truth. Elara's life at Sterling Innovations was irrevocably changed. She was no longer just the quiet data analyst in the corner. Her insights were sought after, her opinions valued, and her presence in meetings brought a new depth of perspective. She found her voice not in loud declarations but in thoughtful questions and precise observations. She learned that true influence did not always require a booming voice or an assertive demeanor. Sometimes it simply required seeing what others could not, and having the courage to act on that sight. She continued to be meticulous in her work, her analytical prowess now applied to broader, strategic initiatives, but she also maintained her innate ability to observe the human element, a skill that had proven to be her greatest asset. Arthur Sterling remained a mentor and a friend, always reminding her of the profound impact she had made. His health remained stable, a living testament to her vigilance. The company thrived under his renewed leadership, a leadership now tempered with a deeper understanding of human vulnerability and the importance of compassionate attention. The story of the shy girl who saved the CEO became a legend within Sterling Innovations, a tale whispered in the hallways. A source of inspiration for new employees, it was a story that taught everyone that heroism does not always wear a cape or stand on a stage. It often resides in the quiet corners and the unnoticed moments in the heart of someone who simply cares. Enough to look closely, to listen intently, and to speak when no one else will. It was a powerful lesson, a reminder that every individual, no matter how seemingly small their role, possesses the potential to make an extraordinary difference, a difference that can ripple outwards, touching countless lives and forever changing the course of events. A testament to the quiet power of observation and the immense courage found in the shyest of hearts.